All right, so today we're talking about perfect squares and square roots. And in order to understand what a perfect square is or what a square root is, we got to do a quick little exponent recap. So remember, the bigger number is called the base, the tiny number is called the exponent. There are a few ways I could read this. I could read this as 3 to the power of 2. It could be 3 to the second power. But the most commonly way that people read an exponent of 2 is by using the word squared. So that would be 3 squared. And we're going to stick with calling these squares because today we're talking about perfect squares. So 3 squared in expanded form would be 3 times 3, which gives us a final answer of 9. 7 squares in expanded form would be 7 times 7 for a simplified answer of 49. So when we talk about creating perfect squares, or what is a perfect square? A perfect square is defined as the product of a rational number by itself. So basically what that means is we're taking a rational number, multiplying it by itself, and whatever the product is, that is the perfect square. So for example, 1 squared is the same thing as 1 times 1, which gives me 1. So 1 is a perfect square. 2 squared would be 2 times 2, which gives me 4. So 4 is a perfect squared. 3 squared, 3 times 3 gives me 9. 4 squared, 4 times 4, which gives me 16. So again, we're just creating a list of products that are called perfect squares. So 1, 4, 9, 16, all perfect squares. Now it's helpful to know the first 20 perfect squares are the most common ones that we will see. So we're just going to fill this out together. So 5 squared would give me 25. 6 squared would give me 36. 7 squared would give me 49. 8 squared gives me 64. 9 squared gives me 81. 10 squared gives me 100. 11 squared is 121. 12 squared is 144. 13 squared is 169. 14 squared is 196. 15 squared, 225. 16 squared, 256. 17 squared, 289. 18 squared, 324. 19 squared, 361. And last but not least, 20 squared gives me 400. So again, not necessary to really sit and memorize, but it is helpful if those first 20 perfect squares are something that we are easily able to recall. So again, perfect squared, we're taking a rational number, multiplying it by itself, and the product is what we call a perfect square. And that goes hand in hand with when we talk about square roots. So whenever you see this symbol right here, it looks like a check mark that has like a roof attached to it. That is our square root symbol. And a square root is a value that when multiplied by itself gives the number. Okay, so that means a square root is just basically the opposite of a perfect square. So we start with the perfect square, and I'm trying to figure out what number, if I multiplied it by itself, would give me that number. So the square root of 1 would be 1 times 1, so the square root is 1. The square root of 4 would be 2, because 2 times 2 gives me 4. The square root of 9 would be 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. The square root of 16 would be 4. The square root of 25 would be 5. The square root of 36 is 6. The square root of 49 is 7. The square root of 64 is 8. The square root of 81 is 9. The square root of 100 is 10. The square root of 121 is 11. The square root of 144 is 12. The square root of 169 is 13. The square root of 196 is 14. The square root of 225 is 15. The square root of 256 is 16. The square root of 289 is 17. The square root of 324 is 18. The square root of 361 is 19. And last but not least, because I know I sound like a broken record machine, the square root of 400 is 20.